Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we'll be in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 20. Some of the prophets said to Elisha, "Look, the place where we meet with you is too cramped for us. Let's go to the Jordan. Each of us will get a log from there, and we will build a meeting place for ourselves there." He said, "Go." One of them said, "Please come along with your servants." He replied, "All right, I'll come." So he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they started cutting down trees. As one of them was felling a log, the axe head dropped into the water. He shouted, "Oh no, my master, it was borrowed." The prophet asked, "Where did it drop in?" When he showed him the spot, Elisha cut off a branch, threw it in at that spot, and made the axe head float. He said, "Lift it out." So he reached out his hand and grabbed it. Now the king of Syria was at war with Israel. He consulted his advisers, who said, "Invade at such and such a place." But the prophet sent this message to the king of Israel: "Make sure you don't pass through this place, because Syria is invading there." So the king of Israel sent a message to the place the prophet had pointed out, warning it to be on its guard. This happened on several occasions. This made the king of Syria upset, so he summoned his advisers and said to them, "One of us must be helping the king of Israel." One of his advisers said, "No, my master, O king. The prophet Elisha, who lives in Israel, keeps telling the king of Israel the things you say in your bedroom." The king ordered, "Go find out where he is, so I can send some men to capture him." The king was told, "He is in Dothan." So he sent horses and chariots there, along with a good-sized army. They arrived during the night and surrounded the city. The prophet's attendant got up early in the morning. When he went outside, there was an army surrounding the city, along with horses and chariots. He said to Elisha, "Oh no, my master, what will we do?" He replied, "Don't be afraid, for our side outnumbers them." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes, so he can see." The Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw that the hill was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As they approached him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike these people with blindness." The Lord struck them with blindness, as Elisha requested. Then Elisha said to them, Excuse me. Then Elisha said to them, "This is not the right road or city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you're looking for." He led them to Samaria. When they had entered Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, open their eyes, so they can see." The Lord opened their eyes, and they saw that they were in the middle of Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, "Should I strike them down, my master?" He replied, "Do not strike them down. You did not capture them with your sword or bow, so what gives you the right to strike them down? Give them some food and water, so that they can eat and drink, and then go back to their master." So he threw a big banquet for them, and they ate and drank. Then he sent them back to their master. After that, no Syrian raiding parties again invaded the land of Israel. Later, King Ben-Hadad of Syria assembled his entire army and attacked and besieged Samaria. Samaria's food supply ran out. They laid siege to it so long that a donkey's head was selling for 80 shekels of silver, and a quarter of a cab of dove's droppings for 5 shekels of silver. While the king of Israel was passing by on the city wall, a woman shouted to him, "Help us, my master, O king." He replied, "No, let the Lord help you. How can I help you? The threshing floor and wine presses are empty." Then the king asked her, "What's your problem?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Hand over your son. We'll eat him today, and then eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. Then I said to her the next day, 'Hand over your son, and we'll eat him.' But she hid her son." When the king heard what the woman said, he tore his clothes as he was passing by on the wall. The people could see he was wearing sackcloth under his clothes. Then he said, "May God judge me severely if Elisha, son of Shaphat, still has his head by the end of the day." Now Elisha was sitting in his house with the community leaders. The king sent a messenger on ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the leaders, "Do you realize this assassin intends to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger arrives, shut the door and lean against it. His master will certainly be right behind him." He was still talking to them when the messenger approached and said, "Look, the Lord is responsible for this disaster. Why should I continue to wait for the Lord to help?" Elisha replied, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of finely milled flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." An officer who was the king's right-hand man responded to the prophet, "Look, even if the Lord made it rain by opening holes in the sky, could this happen so soon?" Elisha said, "Look, you will see it happen with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of the food." Now 4 men with a skin disease were sitting at the entrance of the city gate. They said to one another, "Why are we just sitting here waiting to die? If we go into the city, we'll die of starvations, and if we stay here, we'll die. So come on, let's defect to the Syrian camp. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, well, we were going to die anyway." So they started toward the Syrian camp at dusk. When they reached the edge of the Syrian camp, there was no one there. The Lord had caused the Syrian camp to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a large army. Then they said to one another, "Look, the kings of Israel has paid the kings of the Hittites and Egypt to attack us." So they got up and fled at dusk. Leaving behind their tents, horses, and donkeys, they left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. When the men with the skin disease reached the edge of the camp, they entered a tent and had a meal. They also took some silver, gold, and clothes, and went and hid it all. Then they went back and entered another tent. They looted it, and went and hid what they had taken. Then they said to one another, "It's not right what we're doing. This is a day to celebrate, but we haven't told anyone. If we wait until dawn, we'll be punished. So come on, let's go and inform the royal palace." So they went and called out to the gatekeepers of the city. They told them, "We entered the Assyrian camp, and there was no one there. We didn't even hear a man's voice. But the horses and donkeys are still tied up, and the tents remain up." The gatekeepers relayed the news to the royal palace. The king got up in the night and said to his advisers, "I'll tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know we're starving, so they left the camp and hid in the field, thinking, 'When they come out of the city, we will capture them alive and enter the city.'" One of his advisers replied, "Pick some men and have them take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Even if they are killed, their fate will be no different than that of all the Israelite people. We're all going to die. Let's send them out so we can know for sure what's going on." So they picked 2 horsemen, and the king sent them out to track the Syrian army. He ordered them, "Go and find out what's going on." So they tracked them as far as the Jordan. The road was filled with clothes and equipment that the Syrians had discarded in their haste. The scouts went back and told the king. Then the people went out and looted the Syrian camp. A seah of finely milled flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, just as the Lord had said they would. Now the king had placed the officer who was his right-hand man at the city gate. When the people rushed out, they trampled him to death in the gate. This fulfilled the prophet's word, which he had spoken when the king tried to arrest him. The prophet told the king, 2 seahs of barley will sell for a shekel, and a seah of finely milled flour for a shekel. This will happen about this time tomorrow, in the gate of Samaria. But the officer replied to the prophet, "Look, even if the Lord made it rain by opening holes in the sky, could this happen so soon?" Elisha said, "Look, you will see it happen with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of the food." This is exactly what happened to him. The people trampled him to death in the city gate. Yeah, Elisha's ministry was full of prophetic miracles. Excuse me. So first off, he was meeting with a group of the prophets, and it must have been a decent-sized group because where they were meeting was too cramped for them all. So they went to go build a building, and as they were building the building, the axe head flew off the axe and flew into the Jordan, and Elisha made it float by the power of God. And Elisha is advising the king of Israel on the movements of the Syrian troops, and this royally angers the king of Syria, so he sends a group to capture Elisha. And it's a cool scene because Elisha and his attendant are in the city, and this whole army is surrounding the city, but Elisha's like, don't worry about it. Our side's bigger than theirs. And on asking the Lord to open the servant's eyes, he sees that the Lord's angelic army is composed of more members than the earthly army. So the the army is blinded, and he leads them into Samaria, which is the capital of Israel at this time. And they're sitting ducks, but Elisha advises the king not to kill them, but to give them a banquet and send them away. So he does so. And then you have not so great things, like Syria then besieging Samaria, and the siege is so severe that that food is very scarce, and so much so to the point that these women call out to the king for help. Well, this woman calls out to the king for help and describes this situation of cannibalism, of eating their own children, which was a curse prescribed on Israel if they didn't fulfill their side of the covenant. But yeah, the king is royally cheesed at this whole thing, and he's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the head off of Elisha's shoulders. And Elisha says, don't worry about it. Food's not going to be worth anything this time tomorrow. And so it happens. Carrying on, Acts chapter 15, verse 36 through 16, verse 15. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let's return and visit the brothers in every town where we proclaim the word of the Lord, to see how they are doing. Barnabas wanted to bring John, called Mark, along with them too, but Paul insisted that they should not take along this one who had left them in Pamphylia and had not accompanied them in the work. They had a sharp disagreement, so they parted company. Barnabas took along Mark and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and sent out, commended to the grace of the Lord by the brothers and sisters. He passed through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. He also came to Derbe and to Lystra. A disciple named Timothy was there, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but whose father was a Greek. The brothers in Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was Greek. As they went through the towns, they passed on the decrees that had been decided on by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem for the Gentile believers to obey. So the churches were being strengthened in the faith and were increasing in number every day. They went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been prevented by the Holy Spirit from speaking the message in the province of Asia. When they came to Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them to do this. So they passed through Mysia and went down to Troas. A vision appeared to Paul during the night. A Macedonian man was standing there, urging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul saw this vision, we attempted immediately to go over to Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We put out to sea from Troas and sailed the straight course to Samothrace, the next day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the leading city of the district of Macedonia, a Roman colony. We stayed in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the city gate to the side of the river, where we thought there would be a place of prayer, and we sat down and began to speak to the women who had assembled there. A woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, a God-fearing woman, listened to us. The Lord opened her heart to respond to what Paul was saying. After she and her household were baptized, she urged us, "If you consider me to be a believer in the Lord, come and stay in my house." And she persuaded us. So you have Paul and Barnabas wanting to go out to see how the churches that they initially ministered to were doing. And there's a disagreement, and so Paul and Barnabas go their separate ways, and Barnabas takes Mark, and Paul takes Silas, and off they go. It looks like this group with Paul also contains Luke in it as well, because you have verbiage like in Acts 16:11, we put out to sea from Troas, and it sailed a straight course to Samothrace. So, far from being like a passive commentator on things that didn't occur to him, he's an active participant in all of this. Yeah, and it seems like God is directing Paul and Silas where they should go in their missionary journey. It seems a lot more directed, spirit-wise, than the first one. Also, you have this bit where Timothy accompanies them, and Paul circumcises Timothy. And I'm not quite sure why. I think it's it seems like it's regarding his the fact that everybody knew his father was Greek. Yeah, Paul had Timothy circumcised not for the sake of his salvation, Paul would never do so, but so there would be less to hinder ministry among the Jews. Yeah. Paul argued strongly that it was not necessary for Gentile converts to come under the law of Moses for salvation. And at the time Paul met Timothy, who was delivering the news of this decree that came out of the Acts 15 council. Yet Paul did not contradict his belief or the findings of the council when he had Timothy circumcised. Paul did this not for Timothy's salvation or right standing with God, but so that Timothy's status as a non-circumcised man from a Jewish mother would not hinder their work among the Jews and in synagogues. Paul did things for the sake of love that he would not do for the sake of trying to please God through legalism. Paul insisted that Titus, a Gentile co-worker, did not have to be circumcised. Yeah. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 142, verses 1 through 7. To the Lord I cry out. To the Lord I plead for mercy. I pour out my lament before him. I tell him about my troubles. Even when my strength leaves me, you watch my footsteps. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see. No one cares about me. I have nowhere to run. No one is concerned about my life. I cry out to you, O Lord. I say, you are my shelter, my security in the land of the living. Listen to my cry for help, for I am in serious trouble. Rescue me from those who chase me, for they are stronger than I am. Free me from prison, that I may give thanks to your name. Because of me, the godly will assemble, for you will vindicate me. And finally, Proverbs 17, verses 24 and 25. Wisdom is directly in front of the discerning person, but the eyes of a fool run to the ends of the earth. A foolish child is a grief to his father, and bitterness to the mother who bore him. Yeah. It's good to have wisdom directly in the forefront of your vision. So, anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.